Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, I'm just going to let some people filter in. There is going to be a poll in the chat for everyone to take while we're waiting for the rest of the attendees. It's going to ask, does your business have an AI usage policy in place? Everyone could answer that. I'll launch it. Perfect. You should be seeing that now. My name is Caitlin from Macatawa Technologies, and today we're diving into something that affects every business using AI, whether you realize it or not. I'm joined by Adam, who is a technician here, and who brings an incredible knowledge on all things AI. And we're glad you're here attending, wanting to learn more about this subject. Looking at our poll results, looks like most of us said no, we do not have an AI usage policy in place yet. And honestly, that's exactly why we're here today. So that's one of the things we're going to cover in the next hour. So I'm going to let Adam take it away.
All righty. Thank you, Caitlin. Good morning, everyone. Okay. But a little introduction about me. If you don't know about me, I started with Macatawa Technologies back 2 years, well, last year, technically. Not last year, but the year before, in November. I've been in IT for about 13, 14 years now. Started in corporate IT, then came here afterwards. I started on the help desk and worked my way through to do everything endpoint at my previous employer. And now here I'm working through all kinds of new and fun challenges with, I'm sure, many of our folks that are in this meeting, their businesses, and then other things. And AI has been probably the biggest new thing coming out. Everybody's heard about it. Everybody's talked about it. And so this is kind of what we're going to talk about today for the meeting. So risks, what happens with data, which is a very important piece, hallucinations, compliance, an internal AI usage policy, which again, a lot of folks said no, it's a good thing to talk about, and then general kind of guardrails. So the first thing is, and something I hear very commonly within the industry and within a lot of folks, is that there's a lot of folks that are scared of AI, right? And I think the first thing to talk about is that AI really isn't your enemy. It's not a problem. It is something you should embrace as a business owner, or do your best to do so, because you are going to, and I can say this pretty confidently in business, you're going to end up falling behind the longer you prolong not using AI, just because there are so many effective tools out there that can enhance your business stance. But the piece alongside of that is there are so many tools offering AI, not having proper training and not having proper guardrails for AI policy, etc., that's the biggest issue. This industry is moving so fast. And because it's moving fast, we're running into where all of these programs are releasing AI tools, and yet we don't know where that data is going. We don't know who's entering the data. And we don't, that data could very well be getting cataloged and sold, and it would be entirely without your, without your knowledge. The statistic I have here on the screen, 43% of users admitted they used AI and shared company information. And if they shared it in a free AI model, just an example, just like logging on to ChatGPT with no account, that data can be used to train the AI. And it's actively used to enhance their model. So if a user shares sensitive company data, it's going into ChatGPT's AI model and being used. So basically, it is a potential pitfall. And so I want to discuss, this is sort of like what I want to say, it's sort of like, I'm not here to scare you, but I am. I want to discuss the security aspects of it and make sure everybody is well aware of the risk and then what we could do to prevent it. There we go. So shadow AI. So this is sort of what I was talking about. 50% of employees adopt AI tools without telling IT or management. And that's very common, especially, again, with the widespread, almost every program. I'm sure many folks are just like, yep, AI, it's here. Use our AI. It's great. And these models are developed sometimes off of other AI models. In general, anybody can develop an AI model. It's not an exclusive industry. You do not need enormous data centers. AI models can get developed off of very simple, just a server computer sitting in a warehouse somewhere. And so a lot of times this is where you get that sensitive data heading out and you wouldn't even know about it. AI answers questions. It's an effective tool. It's very easy to ask AI, hey, can you summarize this document for me? But if you don't have a contract, if you're not using a paid version of this in a way that will prevent it from training the model or securing your data, that data is gone. And then on the flip side of that, many employees where AI is very pushed into the environment, they don't know how to use it. They pretend that they know what's going on. They don't have any prompt engineering training. They don't have any any backing. It's asking questions and then when asked, they're like, yeah, I use AI all the time, but maybe not in the most effective way to make their job more efficient. So this is the prime example. This was kind of the first big, not the first big red flag, but one of the biggest red flags. So Samsung in 2023 had their engineers. They basically said, yeah, no problem. You guys can use ChatGPT for Gen AI, and put the data in it, whatever you want. And what ended up happening is that after a little while, they found that all of that data and trade secrets went into the training database for OpenAI and their model. And the biggest piece of that they learned with the result was that they could not get that back. There is no reclaiming that data. They can't tell AI, they can't tell the model without, I mean, in ChatGPT, OpenAI does not care in a sense. They do and they don't. They can't tell their model to not use the data. So basically, trade secrets, semiconductor data got out and is used. And that's obviously a large scale, but smaller scale. Any sensitive data that is industry specific for you that goes into AI, especially, I mean, OpenAI is a large model, but especially smaller models or targeted AI tools where it's specific to your industry, that could very well be gathered and used against your business, which is why it is so important to focus on having those safeguards in place, having an usage policy in place. But so obviously at the end here, the response from Samsung was no more Gen AI in our environment until they had proper safety measures and guardrails. And it took a while. Samsung's a big company, as we all know, took quite a while to get to a point where they felt comfortable with allowing it in their environment going forward. So what happens to the data? I've kind of explained this so far, but basically it goes in, it's recorded and used to train the model. It also is recorded and used to give you answers, and then it's gone. So basically, anything you dump in a free AI model is going to be, that's their data. And probably one of the biggest issues with this, when you think about an employee or even when you're trying to increase usefulness, is it's a tool that is giving you good feedback, good information. And so it's useful and you want to put data into it. And so, it's almost the equivalent when you think about it, especially in a free tool, of like somebody trying to fish information from you and trying to get your Microsoft 365 login. Like by putting stuff into a free AI tool, the free model, you're just handing over that data. With a bigger provider, generally it feels a little quote unquote safer. It's not, your data still gets used, but especially on AI tools that are not with big providers, that data is directly targeted and can be easily used. Um, and even the models that you pay for in some cases, so like especially with ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot, the pro versions of it, which are personal, that's likely the first tier that you pay for a lot of times, don't include, like you have to uncheck a box. They don't include not training the model on your data, but also there are no written guarantees that your data is not being recorded, used, trained AI model, even though it claims it's not. While when you get to a higher licensing level for enterprise business models, they do have that written, no, we will not use it. This is a legal binding contract for things like business and enterprise level licensing. So what is confidential? And I think, similar to any personally identifiable information is confidential, but all of these things should be considered confidential information. Client names, pricing, employee stuff, HIPAA stuff, internal strategy, all those pieces and parts should be definitely considered confidential information. And you shouldn't make an assumption that anybody is going to see, that nobody is going to see the data. That's something that employees really like to think, or really all of us really like to think, is that, oh, I type into AI, no one's ever going to see this. But the truth is, AI is seeing it, and there's always the potential for somebody else to see it as well because of that. That data is egressing, it's going out of your organization. And so it's a cause for concern. And so this is sort of that, I was kind of talking about the consumer versus enterprise. This is sort of the divider here, right? Consumer stuff where it's free tools, it's not, you don't have to pay for it. It just encourages you to use it. Even if it encourages you to use it where it's like, use it for a month and then pay us. There's no guarantee. There's no model, like the model, you don't know which model you're using in some cases, and there's no contractual safeguards. It all goes into, it all just heads into the model and is either used to train, or your data is extracted for use in whatever. Data brokerage is a huge industry. I think, if news, et cetera, if anybody's ever seen it, it is an enormous industry of people that are pulling your data, putting it in a database, and then selling it. And they don't always know who they're selling it to in some cases. People just buy it. And so that's where the data can go. And so now the opportunities, especially for these programs that are industry specific, one of the biggest opportunities they have is to, now it's targeted. You know that somebody here is using, retail data. So the data you're getting is explicitly retail data, and that makes it even more lucrative for the data sellers, among other things. So let's talk about AI in the hallucination standpoint. So an AI hallucination is basically the AI making an assumption, and it is trying to fill in a gap that it doesn't actually know the answer to. One of the things I always talk about with AI is that AI runs on momentum. AI wants to please you. AI wants you to say yes. It's not a human, so the motivation isn't there like for a human to get the affirmative, but it's what the AI is working through. So it's like, yes, this is the answer. Thank you for affirming. Let me give you more answers. And that's where hallucinations start. Even a basic summary task, you give it a Word document, and even though this number seems infinitesimal, right, 0.7%, which means 99.3% of the time it's right. But that means if you give it a document, 0.7% of the time, it's going to make stuff up or leave stuff out that you would want in the document. And that is just asking it, hey, please summarize this document. And that's where kind of the human element of it comes in. You really need to make sure that a human is verifying. You cannot just trust the AI, because even the most basic tasks are completely just may not work properly. 30% of customer AI bots that were deployed in 2024 had to be pulled back or removed because they were just giving bad information. or not giving proper information, or being broken publicly through prompting, through injection, through security concerns. And so, again, the industry is moving fast. People are really eager to put this stuff out in front of customers, and to save money. But it turns out that it's not perfect, and it doesn't know anything, right? So AI is making the best guess at the next word based on statistics. It doesn't know, it doesn't have a brain. So it's just doing its best, quote unquote. The more time goes on, especially with this 0.7% thing, as you get more specific, in need, the hallucinations go up. Legal is the best one, where there are cases where people will ask for legal advice and it can hallucinate like up to 50% of the time. It can give you just completely wrong information based on absolutely nothing, because again, it's trying to get an affirmative. It's trying to please. It's trying to make you happy with its answer, right or wrong. It's indifferent to that idea most of the time. It's just looking for, yes, please tell me I'm right. And so, speaking of chatbots, this is another great example. So this happened in Air Canada. A gentleman went on to their website and engaged with the chat, got the chatbot, and said, "Hey, I need bereavement fares to attend a family funeral." So they had a deal where tickets are cheaper if there's bereavement. The chatbot said, "No problem. You book the ticket right now at full price, and then you will be able to discount it retroactively within 90 days. So you prove there was bereavement, we'll give you the discount." That was not Air Canada's policy. It sounds like a reasonable policy, which is why AI said that'll work. Air Canada is going to be fine with this. I'm just going to allow them to retroactively refund them, because it wasn't their policy. They went to court, and basically Air Canada said, "Hey, well, it was just a robot. That it doesn't know our policies. It got it wrong." Canadian courts said that everything that happened on their website, including the chatbot, they were liable for. That content is their responsibility. If it was printed on the website and said this is the policy, that's the policy, even if it directly contradicted a written policy somewhere else. So that's the sort of risk that entails with just putting these things out there and letting them answer any question. And that's why maybe if you have been on and seen any AI chatbots happening recently, a lot of the chatbots now have very pointed questions you can ask, and then they'll give up and push you to an agent if you're asking questions that don't fit within its parameters, specifically because of things like this. So let's talk compliance. So this is kind of similar to what I'm saying. AI does not get a compliance exemption. So just because you're using AI, and I think this was predictable, I think we all know this, but AI doesn't get a compliance exemption. So if you're in the legal profession, if you deal with any healthcare HIPAA information or the finance sector, AI cannot be used in certain circumstances without either proper guardrails or certain circumstances at all. For the legal profession specifically, you cannot. One of the pieces of data I found was that courts are now asking for, "Hey, did you draft this with AI?" You have to sign and say you didn't, when you do a court filing, because you need to certify that you didn't look it up with AI. Healthcare and HIPAA is probably one of the biggest things. If HIPAA information gets entered without proper AI governance, would be considered a HIPAA violation. And I think these organizations are finding themselves behind in addressing it. But much like how rapidly AI is pushing forward, you are going to see organizations like HIPAA that are going to be finding folks get more and more advanced and go quicker and be able to find these violations. And there's probably going to be a lot of negotiation going forward eventually on some of these HIPAA violations, because that information is being entered. And then finance specifically, it's not necessarily a compliance piece, but AI, when I talked about the specificity earlier, AI routinely gives bad finance information. it will quote rates, it will quote loan rates completely incorrectly. Old data, depending on when the AI model trained on it, if it doesn't look out to the internet and just looks internally for data. And so that could be out-of-date data that you send to a client, and if it turns out it's bad, from a liability standpoint, I'm not in the finance sector, I don't know what that means, but I'm assuming not great. If you say your loan is only 3%, and it turns out it's 4%, right? Somebody takes a hit for that. So that's where, again, the compliance and having the AI do the correct things is very important. Time for the use policy. This is what we talked about at the start. This is also probably one of the most important pieces for any organization, even dipping their toes in AI, is having these sort of 6 things, right? And there's pieces and parts to each one of them. I'll try to go through them all. But essentially, like, approved tools. So I think that's when you're first starting out, it's like, we are going to go with Copilot. We are going to go with hats. Like, whatever AI tools you are going to say, yes, these are the tools we are going to use, it needs to be listed, and then it needs to say you need to, like, no, you can't use any AI tools beyond this. If you don't specify that, everybody will use whatever they want, whatever AI tool they find most effective, and that's, your data finds its way into places you don't want. Data boundaries. This could be as simple as, you cannot enter any of our company data in AI. You can only enter certain company data in AI. No HIPAA data because we're not set up for it, et cetera, et cetera. Very important for that. Verification workflow, that is making sure that a human is looking at the output to AI. And this is where, and I actually just had this the brief conversation today with the idea that AI is saving time, but there's still the need for a human to verify what it puts out. And that's exactly, so while you might think, okay, I'm going to hand this to AI, then I don't have to do this work. No, AI should always be verified. So while maybe a 20-hour job can get reduced, you still may need to spend 4 hours on it through what AI outputs to verify the documentation, verify the thing that it puts out, and then edit it appropriately. Because there is always that case where AI, the 0.7% is very important. AI can hallucinate. And it also can lull you into a false sense of security. It doesn't right the majority of the time. It will suddenly take a turn and do it wrong. And you will not have any rhyme or reason as to why. It just picked the wrong statistical path. And that's where you ended up. The model also has a lot to do with that sort of failing. The less advanced the model, the less computations it does, the more likely it is to give you bad information or not enough information. Ethical guidelines, obviously, are very important. It's what you are, from an organizational standpoint, it's like, what's the sensitive data, like what's your conduct within, so making sure that you're only putting business information in, you're not doing things like using AI for personal, et cetera, just important to have that there. Violation measures, obviously, that's what happens when something goes wrong, right? Do you lose AI privileges? Does something worse happen? It's a great question. That's for your organization to decide. Many suggestions to be had there. And then finally, probably one of the most important things, AI training. There needs to be some factor of discussing AI and training with people, because if you're not doing a training, you can hand them the tools, but if they don't know how to use them, they may not have a good basis for how to function properly within. So this is just kind of the general, like, guard rules. So when we talk about the policy, that's more broad. This is basically the idea, right? Is like, how do we get there? So you start with auditing. Who in your business is using the tools? If the tools are acceptable, if they have enterprise grade agreements with sign-offs, great. You need to upgrade to them. If not, you need to discontinue. Or you need to come to a point where you decide that's an acceptable risk for your data to leave. And that's where the acceptable use policy comes in the idea that if we trust our team members to not be sending that data out, should be fine. Then the training step, again, this is part of the acceptable use policy, but training is very important for that. And then human review and, creating, actually, once all of that's done, then you're kind of going and saying, okay, now we create the policy framework around it. So as I'm going to wrap up here, essentially where we're at is, AI is a competitive advantage. It needs to be properly managed. It is moving so fast and there's so many tools for it. You really want to have it, controlled, contained, and have policies around it that make sense. Your data is at risk. Your data is at risk right now. If anybody's using a free AI tool, your data is at risk, and you want to stop them. It should be, I would say, you want to consider that like a fire within your organization. Like you want to stop them and get compliance set around it. And compliance, it doesn't stop for AI. Compliance is always going. And then, I think the last two pieces here are very important. Is that like, don't think as soon as you think AI isn't hallucinating, be concerned because it is most of the time. There are definitely points where it isn't, but always be worried that it's giving you bad information. That's where that verification part comes in. And then you need an acceptable, if you can hear this, you need an acceptable AI usage policy. And we can help with that as well. All right. And now I'll pass it to Caitlin for any questions or that have come up through the webinar, if anybody has anything.
Okay, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and drop those in the chat. I'll give a few minutes. While we're waiting, I do want to mention that our next webinar is next week, Tuesday, to wrap up this AI topic. And we're going to be going over how to introduce AI into your business without disrupting it. So a more natural way of introducing it to your employees, your processes, everything. If you want to go ahead and scan that QR code. Looks like we have a question in the chat.
HATS application, protection limitations. Sure. So HATS, essentially, it is, the best way to put it is, it's a credit-based model that lets you use kind of any AI model you want. Which is very, I mean, within reason, but they're really, I haven't really seen many models discluded from there. So if you like ChatGPT, if you like Anthropic, etc. But from a security standpoint, what it's doing is it's all instanced data that does not egress out from it because of how like they have it set up with those security practices in mind. So it's all kind of like incognito. It's like being in an incognito browser permanently, with the idea being great. You can send out your request. You can send it out with sensitive information. Everything within HATS is programmed to not save or egress that information out to the model because of how it's pulling down the answer from the API, essentially. So there's no risk to your data using HATS, which is why it's nice. One of the pieces with that becomes, from a limitation standpoint, there is the integration. A lot of folks like having integration directly into their applications, things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint. HATS currently doesn't offer something like that. And that's where I see it as like kind of a big limitation, is that a lot of folks like to have it. You could still integrate it in 365 and have those pieces and parts there, but there's a missing, there's kind of that missing immediate, you still have to open a web browser to jump into it. So that tends to be the biggest thing that like I personally find a struggle sometimes. Like I have to open up a web browser, have a web browser open constantly, versus just having a nice little app in my program. But other than that, it also comes with, I would say, more bonuses on top of security from like agentic AI built in. And other things we could discuss as well. But yeah, those are the main things when it comes to the protection, is sort of like that data protection and then missing the app. So approximate cost, I think that would be a good one. Abby for account management in this case. There's definitely there's a range of costs and there's a range of use. So that'd probably be a good one to take offline and we can discuss it. We can discuss it together. All right, one from Tony. Yeah. So with AI, managing risk is incredibly important. How should an organization train their employees to use AI responsibly? Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Tony. So I think when it comes to training and responsible AI use, I think it's helping employees understand what can and cannot go into AI, or what should and should not go into AI, mainly being protective information, HIPAA information, organizational information, without those proper guardrails set up. And so helping employees understand the programs they should be using with that sort of like the AI acceptable use policy of having the programs outlined, like we only use ChatGPT. Great. If we have the proper safeguards set up in ChatGPT, we can put that information in there, but otherwise we shouldn't. It really starts with establishing what AI programs those things can go into. After that, the training really becomes the best ways to use it and the best data to put into it. But the safeguards, the technical safeguards, are really the first biggest thing, I think, when it comes to working and then training the employees to not use programs that aren't that. And part of that whole process is making it easy and making it useful for the employees, because part of what happens in any job role, regardless, I mean, AI, you could talk about AI, you could talk about a hand tool, is that if you could hand them the tool, but if it is not what they need to use, we should be working to figure out what they need to make their lives, make their job easier. Because you can just say, here's ChatGPT, go. But if they don't know how to use it, if there's a different tool that they do know how to use and it works better, why would they use ChatGPT? At least from a, from a normal worker perspective, I want to use the tool that works and makes my job easier. So it's working with them to figure out what tools you need and then training them to use the tools in an effective way. Any other questions out there? Tony, another great question. There are starting to have Gen AI tools, security tools that are showing up that are able to audit that sort of information. We can certainly audit internally if it's an installed program, but it does become a challenge because of I think one of the biggest challenges, and that's why the education is so important and why an acceptable use policy is so important in that clarity, is that there are so many programs that are sending AI into them, and you don't know. It's like the next update, it's like, awesome, this program I use every day for ERP suddenly has AI involved in it. And unless it's reported, like as an IT, from an IT posture perspective, we may not know. And so that's where it comes to having those proper use policies and then really monitoring. But there are products that are coming out in the enterprise space and starting to come out in the business space where there's tracking, auditing AI, auditing data egress in a way that is doing like a Gen AI security posture. But again, much like AI is still, like, regardless of how much this feels like, oh my gosh, like it's this big takeover sort of piece, it is in its infancy, and so are these products. Like if AI is in its infancy, these are even earlier on. But we'll see more and more of that sort of like Gen AI security come out as part of these developments with AI in general. Hopefully that answered the question. All righty. Well, then I will go ahead and move to the last slide here. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And of course, yeah, if there's an AI readiness assessment for your business, reach out to us. If you're a client, you can reach out to us in support. But obviously, sales. If you're looking at us for the first time, be glad to help you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Just make sure you register for session 3 next week. I'll leave that QR code up here for a few minutes, and I'll drop the link in the chat for anyone who would like to access it that way. Thank you for joining us. Bye.